Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. We are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, and I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and this is episode 5 of our 5-part NASA series. So if you've been listening to all of the other episodes, part of this series, then thank you so much. This is the 5th part from specific to the trip that I took at the end of June, but we frankly made a lot of good contacts with a lot of folks within the NASA SpaceX team, and then also within the meteorologist community. So I am hoping to have more space, weather, logistics focused episodes with experts from those fields on in the future. But I thought what would be good for a fun sort of round out is making this episode about all of the cool things learned during those previous 4 episodes, but then also a lot of the things that I couldn't include in a dedicated episode. So some of the more behind the scenes moments, some of the things like the NASA lunchroom. What does the NASA lunchroom look like? Astronaut doors and launch stickers and launch services programs, and all of those cool things that I wanted to talk about. So I thought, why not just make a behind the scenes type episode? And so that is what this is going to consist of. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall trip. Then I'm going to talk about, some cool moments that didn't make it into a specific episode. Then I'm going to review a little bit of like behind the scenes things, some photos that I took that didn't make it into a previous episode, or maybe it did, but they're still cool. So I'm going to show it again, even if I did maybe show it. I tried to keep all of them separate, but this 2-day event, I had my main cell phone on me. I had a backup cell phone on me that I like to record B-roll with, so I'm not, inhibited by my current device. That is, I feel like I'm perpetually seeing the iPhone storage is full. So I always bring a backup phone to any kind of event that I go to. And then I also brought my nice Canon camera. I have been so afraid to take this camera down, the one that I am using right now, because I don't want to mess anything. It was such a process to get a nice camera set up for this podcast that I have been afraid to take it down ever since. And so for a lot of the conferences that I've gone to, you may have noticed that, maybe the quality isn't all the way there as it should be. I specifically remember the TMSA that I was just at. I did not bring a nice camera. Let's just say the equipment was subpar, and it showed in the content. So considering that my NASA trip was about 2 weeks after TMSA, I was not going to be in that situation again. And so I took the risk, and the risk paid off because I got a lot of really great content using a really nice camera. It was a lot of files. It was a lot of sorting through. And so essentially what I did is I take inventory of all of the content that I had. And I assumed that this episode that I'm recording right now, I assumed that would be the one episode that I would make after the trip. Turns out there was so much really good content that came from this, so many fantastic speakers that I was able to record those conversations. Sometimes not the best, it was a little shaky at times. I probably needed to bring, set some equipment up on a tripod, in order to avoid some of those issues. But the content, the audio, it was still all there. And so published a lot of it, organized a lot of it, but the stuff that didn't make it into the previous 4 episodes, that's what I want to share with y'all today. Also, in case if you are watching, you might have seen this NASA bag back in the corner of my footage. And I have been waiting to record this episode because NASA gave us this goodie bag. And so to end this episode, I'm going to kind of go through it and show you what was given to us by a bunch of different teams within NASA. I have only been to one launch, born and raised in Florida. I thought that launches were something that were really risky to kind of go to because there were only a few of them a year and they were pushed back a lot. So, kind of trying to like coordinate the logistics behind like booking, a hotel or, driving down there only for, to have a delay was, always kind of like a very real concern in the back of my head. But I was able to see my first shuttle launch back in 2020 with the over the summer, which was just sort of like a weird time. Cape Canaveral, which is where the overwhelming majority of NASA launches take place, is still technically like federal government land, and you're in the state of Florida, and Florida, kind of never really closed down for COVID, better or worse. I would argue better. But at that point, it was still like a really like murky area where what you could do on in regular Florida land versus federal government land was still very much challenging. So it wasn't I will say it wasn't the best experience trying to go and watch a launch during that time frame. However, fast forward 4 years, the NASA social program, I cannot speak enough about how awesome this was and how well we were treated. Like I said, it was a couple dozen people, a lot of them astrophotographers, meteorologists, and then I think I was the only podcaster on this trip. A lot of folks, of course, like meteorologists, they have media training as well, so they're on camera all the time. But I believe I was the only podcaster on the trip, which was kind of cool. But it's basically a program for folks who may not be aware. NASA Social is almost like an extension of the PR team. And what they do is they have an email list. You can go and find them. They have a Twitter/X account. So you can go find the NASA social handle. They have a link in their bio of where you can sign up for email alerts. And on that email alert, they will let you know ahead of time, probably about a month or 2 months in advance of future launches, that they are going to have a NASA social team assigned to that launch, because there's so many more launches now. I mentioned earlier about a few launches a year, so it was very challenging to even think about trying to get down to Cape Canaveral for a launch. But now there are several launches every single week. Even one of the photographers that was on this tour, he was based in Orlando, and he said that he tells all of his friends and family, he said, if you want to see a launch, come to Orlando because there's about 3 a week. And so so we went from a few a year to a few every week. And so that's how massive this industry has grown. And so knowing all of that, there's so many more launches, and NASA Social is a program that has been kicking up a lot more. I had to apply a couple times. I got denied a couple times, but the third time is the charm, because I did get accepted for this particular mission, and it was just such a fantastic experience. I'm going to be applying to every single one of them in the future, and I would encourage you to do the same. You do have to pay for your own travel, hotels, things like that. But I would argue that the behind the scenes access that you get is so worth it. So if you're interested in participating in a program like this, and you have a social media presence, I highly encourage you to go to the NASA social account, get signed up for their email alerts, and then maybe you too could participate in a future launch like this. Highly, highly recommend. So let's get into a little bit of the behind the scenes. Okay, so first, I want to talk about the overall trip. And I've mentioned, how many people were in my group with the NASA social team. So it was about, I think, 26 of us that were in the group itself. And I will say, as a sports fan, I had no idea that space fans existed like this. I mean, I'm a fan of space. I would call myself a fan of space. But the people that I was with were real fans of space. Like, they could name off different launches. They could name off the astronauts or the equipment that were on that launch. They could name off the years, all of these different stats, like they were talking about a sports team. And that passion was so just infectious and contagious, and it was amazing to be a part of. It made me want to go and learn so much more, and that's exactly what I've done since the end of June. It's been, watching a lot of YouTube videos, watching a lot of documentaries, and I've talked about a couple of them in previous episodes. But it's just there's so much going on, and there's going to be so much more going on. One of the stats that I heard, just to kind of put things into perspective, is that before the year 2020, there was about 2,500 satellites in space. From 2020 to 2024 was about 8,000 additional satellites added to that mix. Now, over the next 10 years, it's estimated that that number is going to increase to 200,000 satellites. That's how massive this industry and how quickly this industry is growing, not just in, sort of the government side of things, but in the private sector, in the commercial sector. That's where the most growth is coming from. And so, just knowing that there are, just cool space nerds that are out there, that are following this so very closely. It has to be so exciting, maybe for them to watch it over a long period of time, and then for all of these things to start happening. Really, I would argue, I think SpaceX started in 2008. And then, so arguably over the last 10 years has just been a massive amount of growth, both in the private side and private and commercial side of things, and also using different space agencies all over the globe. So it was really cool to be around that crowd and to experience a launch with that crowd, because they were especially right after the launch was over. And I'm going to play some of the videos of the people that I bonded with and I was with on this trip, and a little bit later on. But just that hype, the excitement, especially right after the launch was over, it was so incredible to be around that kind of positive energy. Are you in freight sales with a book of business looking for a new home? Or perhaps you're a freight agent in need of a better partnership? These are the kinds of conversations we're exploring in our podcast interview series called The Freight Agent Trenches, sponsored by SPI Logistics. Now, I can tell you all day that SPI is one of the most successful logistics firms in North America who helps their agents with back office operations such as admin, finance, IT, and sales, but I would much rather you hear it directly from SPI's freight agents themselves. And what better way to do that than by listening to the experienced freight agents tell their stories behind the how and the why they joined SPI. Hit the freight agent link in our show notes to listen to these conversations, or if you're ready to make the jump, visit spi3pl.com. Another thing that was really cool to be a part of is just I think the amazing scale and size of these things. I have shared a couple of these images on social media and in previous episodes, but I think it just bears repeating, just the size and the scope of these things. So let me bring up my Instagram, and I like that picture a lot. But this image right here, this is me standing in front of the transporter. The transporter is what the rocket or the satellite goes on top of, and then it transports it over a gravel lane. So think of like a traditional road lane that you are traveling on. Right next to it in the sort of Cape Canaveral NASA Kennedy compound. It's such a massive compound with dozens of buildings, 22 launch pads. I don't know why I only assumed that there was maybe one or two launch pads, but there are actually 22 in Cape Canaveral. So that was incredible to see. But all of those launches, they use what's called the transporter. And that's what you're seeing in this photo. I am standing in front of half of it. So all of these transporters, the rocket or the satellite, it goes on top of the transporter, and it goes about a mile per hour down this dirt gravel road that runs parallel to a traditional road that everybody else was on. So the scale of this thing is just so massive. Here's a video that you can kind of see the other half of it, and you can see some people like walking around below it to give kind of a glimpse into how large these things are. But that was one of the bigger takeaways, is just how massive these facilities are. You can't really tell in this photo, but this is the vehicle assembly building where the Artemis program is being built. So giant rockets are going to be in here. You can kind of see a lot of these different levels. And so that is, essentially a rocket takes up the entire, space here in the middle of what you're looking at. And then all of these different pads can be worker pads that they can walk out and they can assess things, they can measure them, and do what they got to do to make sure that that rocket gets into space. Scrolling through some of the other images here, this is actually the media area where we watched the launch. You can see over here with the Goes You sign. That sign is where the countdown clock is, and it's apparently 8K. I didn't even know that I guess, frame rate existed. But yeah, it's an 8K countdown clock that shows different images on there. Apparently, they also have sometimes they have like media nights, and they'll sit in front of it and they'll be able to watch a movie. I thought that was a cool little nugget of information. That is the outside look of the vehicle assembly building, which that American flag that you see in the photo, a semi truck can fit on each one of the lines of the American flag. That's how massive that American flag is. And that is the vehicle assembly building, which I just showed you that I was standing in front of. So the transporter is also inside of the vehicle assembly building, but then this building too. So that is how massive this building is. So just I'm in a really, really incredible sight to see. I also wanted to go through some of the photos that I took on the trip that didn't make it to, I guess, the full episode format. So let me go ahead and I'm going to bring up. Okay, so let me see if I can make this a little bit better. Perfect. Okay, cool. Okay, so just another picture to kind of give you like the scale of these things in the background. So right up here, that's the capsule where the GOES-U satellite is in. If you look on the left and the right-hand side of the rocket itself, these are the boosters. So this is the Falcon 9 Heavy. That's called the Falcon 9 Heavy. It is a SpaceX rocket. And what makes this incredible is that this system is reusable. It's completely redefined like how we think about space travel, because before it was just a use once and then never use it again, which made missions incredibly challenging to do frequently and also expensive. So for this, having the reuse or rocket reusability has been a massive game changer and is a big reason why we're going from 8,000 satellites in lower Earth orbit to a projected 200,000 of them in the next 10 years. So that is, I just think that that's cool to kind of visualize it, that those two boosters on the left and the right hand side, those are the ones that come back and they return to the launch pad. I'll have a video for you a little bit later on of what that process looks like. Another cool thing about NASA is that there's memorabilia everywhere. We probably toured close to a dozen buildings, and there was memorabilia inside of all of them. So you're looking at, obviously, JFK's famous speech where he asked not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And if I haven't mentioned already, if you're listening on the audio version, this is one that you're going to want to watch. I'm sorry to like make you, switch programming, switch gears a little bit. But we are about, I would say, probably 17 minutes into this broadcast. And I probably should have mentioned that a little bit earlier, that you want to watch this one. So there's should be a link in the show notes to watch the YouTube version so you can see all of the photos and all of the imagery that I'm sharing. So back to this photo, memorabilia everywhere. So lots of also just like motivation all over the place too. It was just really, I'm probably going to say it was really cool a million times in this episode. So bear with me here. Okay, so this is, if you listen to our episode 4, then you listen to the Lockheed Martin representative that was talking about, and I'm blanking on his name, I'm sorry about that. But he stood in front of the Orion spacecraft. So this image right here is actually a 4th replica. And the thing that was cool about this is that this was a project that they worked with the European Space Agency. So it was a space agency and the private sector coming together and building this spacecraft. That was really, kind of cool to see. Is it cool again? So obviously you have Neil Armstrong's suit right here, the replica of it that's behind glass. Like you can't obviously touch that. It's like museum quality stuff. This is also some other memorabilia, just sort of the evolution of the different rockets that are regularly at NASA. Okay, now I guess, sharing images is one thing, but sharing videos, I have to jump through a couple more hoops in order to share that. So in this next clip, this is actually the video that I got with my cell phone recording the launch. And so I think what is the craziest part about this is that the heat and the flames I would say the heat and the light from the launch were so intense that there was a couple moments that I was like, I feel like they should have given us like safety classes for this or we were 3 miles from the launch pad, which is about as close as you can get. Maybe if you're like an animal or a bird or something, you can get a little bit closer, but this is about as close as you can get. And you can feel the power of these things. So let me go ahead and play this part, and you can hear it as far as like audio wise, you can hear it through the just even the camera. So let me play it. All right, here we go. Oh, wow! It's so bright.
Wow. 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 Wow.
There it goes.
So I was the dummy that set my camera up and then didn't really. I was so entranced by the launch itself that I had forgotten to actually film it. Continuing still to go up. I did get it on my cell phone, but this is from my Canon camera. So let me see if I can bring up the next clip, which is the boosters returning, which the boosters were the sides of the rocket itself. So they come back and they land on a launch pad, either on a barge or on the launch pads in and around Kennedy Space Centers. And so you can see these 2 little dots. Those are the boosters that have already detached from the rocket itself that are coming back down. And so I'm going to speed through this because what I think is the craziest thing is I'm too far away to actually film the boosters landing, but the sonic boom that you hear afterwards, because what's crazy is that you can see these things happening, but you don't hear them until several seconds later. So I thought that was really cool. So let me go ahead and hit play, and I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. So those are the parachutes that are coming out, kind of trying to slow them down, and then they will. Okay, so let me see if I can. Wow! So cool!
Now wait for it.
Oh, to hear it?
Wow. Oh, wow. So much math. Years of math. Wow.
Woo! Shit! God! Woo! Wow! Car alarms are going off. Okay, so that was my annoying yelling, but everybody else was yelling too because it was a pretty hype moment. So let me bring up a few more photos, but that was the boosters returning, which created a really loud sonic boom afterwards. It scared everyone, even though we kind of knew it was coming. It still didn't have kind of an idea of what to, or at least I didn't have an idea of what to expect. Another thing that I do want to show off is the astronaut doors. So there are these doors that every astronaut in the history of NASA, if you've gone to space, you've walked out of these 2 doors. And so you can kind of see all of the different launch stickers. For every launch, for every mission, there is a logo that is made. And so they use these stickers and they put them everywhere. There's another image that I want to bring up. Brokering success demands a battle-ready strategy. TIE TMS equips freight brokers with the ultimate battle station for conquering a tough market. With TIE, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform where rate intelligence and quote history converge on a single screen. It's not just a page, it's a strategic command center designed to help brokers win. TIE equips your team with all of the data they need to negotiate with confidence and allows them to communicate directly with carriers and customers from a simple control base. Revolutionize the way your brokers perform by giving them a competitive advantage with TIE TMS. For more info, go to tai-software.com/battle stations, and we also have a link for you in the show notes to sign up for a demo. but it's this door that is located in the Launch Services Program. Yeah, that's what it's called, Launch Services Program. So that's like the launch division of all of NASA. And so they have this door. Every mission that has ever been carried out is on this door. And so and there's a front and a back of it too. I think I can bring up the next one. Yes, perfect. Awesome. Worked good. So you can kind of see the other side of the door. Like they're going to run out of room, especially at the rate of how many launches are taking place right now. So let me see if I can just make things a little bit easier and just sort of start scrolling through. I'm going to start at the beginning. So this is the NASA doors that every astronaut has ever walked out of. So that was a good like little photo op opportunity. Let's see. Oh, this is how we started the day. So everybody meets in a parking lot, you get on a bus, but you actually have a dog that comes through, security guard that comes through and sniffs through all of our stuff just to make sure we aren't, carrying anything crazy inside of NASA facility. This was the first classroom. So it looks, it was really a classroom that we walked into, but a lot of the hallways, very boring. I know that they have, very much like, memorabilia and things like that all over display everywhere. But that's more of like the front of the buildings, like kind of the lobbies and stuff. This is like a typical NASA hallway, which I still thought was cool because then some of the doors were open. You can kind of peer in and see what's going on, and just, smart people working on cool things. Is never not impressive. This is the vehicle assembly building. I just thought that was a cool photo. So that'll probably be an Instagram post here soon. Oh, inside at the vehicle assembly building, that's that transporter that I talked about earlier, just so you can see kind of the scale of it. It's located inside the vehicle assembly building. Another shot of Artemis, or the Artemis sign inside the vehicle assembly building. That's just looking up. Another transporter video. Oh, this is also every astronaut that has ever gone into space, or I think worked on these different equipment. So they get to sign their name. I'm going to replay that. But yeah, look at all those names that were part of all of these missions. There's so many people that have to come together for these things to take place. Now, this is so I didn't explain this earlier, but I talked about the transporter. And so there's two transporters. I think there's like 8 drivers of them in total, but one of the transporters is being refurbished. You can kind of see in the background a little bit here, see how rusty these panels are. So they are replacing these panels. So right now, this transporter is out of commission. It's getting maintenance work done on it, but they let us kind of walk around and walk underneath it, which I thought was cool to kind of really feel the scale of these things. Here are more parts from the transporter that they are replacing. They actually told us that we could take this if we wanted to. It actually, kind of helped them out because there were so many of these things around. Obviously, it's very heavy. It's very greasy. No, I did not grab it. But looking at this photo, I probably should maybe have tried to like take a lug nut or something off of it. I will say I borrowed a rock. So the little rocks that you see on the ground, I did borrow a rock. If anybody from NASA is listening, I just borrowed it. So if you want it back, I will mail it back. I'm just borrowing it. But yeah. Let's see what else. Oh, that's the vehicle assembly building. And this is just kind of like an up close video of the tread itself. And that is, again, what is being replaced. This is one wheel of the transporter. It looks like a tank. But these are all the treads and all of the parts that are being swapped out for newer parts. There's that door again with all of the launch stickers on it. I will say this part of the tour, which was the launch services program, there were a lot of rooms that we walked into that we were not allowed to take photos, especially if computer screens were on. We weren't allowed to take photos of that. There was another, I can actually see it on that photo. There was there's also a name badge. So we have our sort of press badge that we got, but then we also have like a visitor's badge, a visitor's NASA badge. We were not allowed to have that on during photos or to have it be photographed. So that was something that they told us, if you see it in any photos, just try to blur it out and try not to post it because security reasons. We want to keep our people safe. This video here, remember that road for the transporter that I was talking about that runs parallel? We're on the the real road on the bus. But this is the transporter gravel road that runs right next to us. So the transporter will be on that road anytime that there is a mission going on. Here's one of the launch pads that's before they put the rocket up there. This was on Monday of the trip that we weren't exactly sure if we were going to be able to see the launch because they hadn't put the rocket up yet. But later on that night, I think a little bit after midnight, possibly closer to like 1 a.m., they did wheel the Falcon 9 or the Falcon Heavy out and then loaded it up. And so that was a welcome surprise. This is another one of the launch pads. And this is just kind of, I wanted to show this one because of how close it is to the water. Like that is a beach right there. That is a Cape Canaveral national shoreline. So very similar to like a national park. There's also national forestry, and this one is a national shoreline. So this is also a fantastic spot to go to if you want to watch a launch, but then also have like a cool beach day. Water's beautiful, sand is beautiful. Even like the foliage all around is great. But yeah, it's literally right next. So you can kind of get a glimpse of like how big Port or Cape Canaveral is, or just like Kennedy Space Center, because let me see if I can pause this. You can see that's in the background. That's the vehicle assembly building that I just showed you. So it's that far away. And so think about it, 22 different launch pads. And this is just another one. Another thing I wanted to show you is if you look on the launch pad itself, so you kind of see these poles that stick straight up, that's for lightning. So they don't want these things to get struck by lightning. Lightning is Florida is the lightning capital of the United States, possibly North America. And so just lightning is a problem. And so they use this as a way to try to prevent electronics from being damaged by too much lightning. It's just a little, I'll probably post this one to Instagram soon. So that's another one I need to take note of. Oh, this is one of the murals that is outside of the media building. And so this is where we are walking in to kind of wait it out to see if the launch was going to happen. At this point that this video was taken, it was still only a 50-50 shot that the launch was going to take place, because typical Florida weather in, storms every day in the summer, pretty much. So they thought that this was going to be the same for this day. That's why it was a 50-50 shot. In the morning, it was only 30%. So it got a little bit better throughout the day, but the launch did end up happening. And I think it was only delayed by about 10 minutes, which was awesome. The following day, though, that was the day that I drove home, and I drove home around the time that the launch would have taken place. And it was raining so bad. It was so stormy. So thank God that they picked Tuesday instead of Wednesday. And also that would have sucked if people would have missed, because what would have happened is that they would have pushed the launch. If it got delayed on Tuesday, they would have pushed the launch to Wednesday. And then that would have required all of the people that flew in. Overwhelming majority of the people taking part in the NASA social program flew in. And so a lot of them had flights out to go back home, back to work the day after. So thank God it did take place on that day. So everybody could, be around and watch it and cheer and have fun, like what you just saw in the videos prior. This is inside one of their media rooms, which is, there's so many buttons, there's so many equipment going on here. But this was just one of the media rooms. Oh. This is one that I've been meaning to show. So we were on the bus, and you're traveling, pretty normally on a bus throughout the different compound. And you don't really face like traffic jams unless there's a rocket involved. So the following day, in the morning, there was going to be a Starlink launch, sending a bunch of Starlink satellites up into space. And what you can see here is this one is not on the transporter. It's not on NASA's transporter. This is a SpaceX mission. So they can do things however they want. So they don't necessarily go on the transporter gravel lot, which is what you see to the left here. But you see you see a regular car, you see a garbage truck, and then in front of that is a rocket being transported, or a capsule being transported to the rocket launch pad. And so it moves very slow. And so so we were kind of stuck in a little bit of a traffic jam because of it. You can kind of see a better view of it here where it's on that truck, where that capsule has, all the Starlink satellites inside of it, and that goes on top of the rocket. So learning lots of new space things today. Here's another view of the rocket traffic jam, or the capsule caused traffic jam, heading over to one of the other launch gates and launch facilities. Another video. I took a lot of videos of this. Frankly, it was kind of hard to get a good photo of it, but I figured this is a logistics show, so I have to get the traffic, I have to get the capsules and the rocket that are on the road and causing backups in traffic. It's probably the coolest backup I'll ever be a part of when it comes to traffic related things. But yeah, I took a lot of videos of it. This is where, so we got to park. You can see the capsule again over there, but you can see, look at all of the cameras out here. And the only thing they told us, like, we could walk out here, and that's what you see here. We're actually standing on the transporter, like gravel lane. But you can see here all of the different cameras that are set up to record the launch. People can't get that close, but you can set up your camera and hope for the best. I don't know if my camera would survive. I imagine there's probably some heat protectant stuff that are on these cameras. But yeah, it's a ton of cameras. Here's even more cameras that are all set up. And so that's about as close as we got to get. Oh, this is if you ever wondered what lunch looks like at NASA, this is just a video of one of their lunchrooms. I don't know what deal Subway made with NASA, but they were in two. We had lunch on Monday, we had lunch on Tuesday, and both of the buildings, they were separate buildings. Both of them had a Subway built inside of it. So I don't know what deal Subway made with NASA, but meh. I'm assuming that the folks at NASA would love a variety of options outside of Subway. The first day there was only two. There was Sonny's Barbecue and Subway. So out of the two, I chose Subway, obviously, because Sonny's is bleh. But the second day, we did have an option to choose from, and that was a Greek restaurant, kind of like a coffee pastry style restaurant, and then they had another Subway. I'm pretty sure they had maybe another restaurant in there. I'm not exactly sure, but this is what the cafeteria looks like inside of the main NASA headquarters building. They got a nice Juneteenth mural on the wall there, just showing a lot of what Black Americans have contributed to the space program. And then, of course, you see you have the Greek restaurant here in the back. You have the little coffee shop over on the left, and then you have the Subway on the right. But that Greek spot, that was really good. Really, really good. Okay, let me see if I can bring up. I actually didn't mean to X out of that, so I'm going to bring that window up again. But this photo right here is so cool. This was right next to where all of the astronauts walk out of. And so they have several parking spots that say astronaut parking only. That's listed right there. So that's a good photo to end my little thank you for looking at my photos. I definitely feel like my grandmother when she comes back from a gambling trip and she wants to show me all of her photos. God rest her soul. But yes. Okay, let's move on to things that I could not fit into a specific episode. I already kind of talked about the launch services program tour. This is where we couldn't take photos of computer screens inside of the building, only the backs of them. Launch traditions I thought were really cool too, like the door with the stickers and all the kind of the names on the wall and the vehicle assembly building. I will say, this one is really good. So the press conference that took place the day before the launch. So all of us, so they hold a very professional, press conference where all of their experts get up on the stage and they're doing a live broadcast out to all of their different channels. What was cool is that we were able to be in that building while this press conference was taking place. And if you wanted to ask a question, you got to ask it during this press conference and it aired out to the rest of the world. And of course, your girl has got to get a question in. I had no idea what question I was going to ask because I feel like they were just saying so many things that it was difficult to come up with a question that they hadn't already covered, if that makes sense. So I'm going to share a little moment when I got to ask a question, and I'll link to it in the show notes in case you want to watch it, but you might want to. I don't know. I don't know if you will or not. So let me hit play.
Thanks so much. Okay, I think we'll come back here to the room. Any questions up here? Front row?
All of the data that you're collecting. So with all of the data that you're collecting, I imagine it's a massive amount of information to sort through. So are you using any kind of like AI or machine learning in order to filter through a lot of that data? And then what matters to just the common person that's worried about whether and how it impacts their life?
So that data is called telemetry. So as the mission telemetry engineer, it is my job, between launches, it is my job to write software that processes all of that data and makes it available to the engineers who are sitting on console for these launches. We may have people who are specializing in propulsion, and there may be a team of several dozen people working together looking at diagrams, and these diagrams may have associated measurements, associated sensors that we receive the data from. As the mission telemetry engineer, I write software that allows them to plug in the name of this sensor and get the reading from that sensor as it is right now, or over the course of the last 5 minutes, or over the course of the last 30 minutes. So to answer your question, for one, there's a whole lot of people looking at that data. So we talked earlier about how there are hundreds of thousands of measurements coming off of a Falcon Heavy rocket, including the measurements that we're getting from the spacecraft. In this case, GOES-U has telemetry interleaved with the Falcon Heavy telemetry. But there are hundreds of people who need to look at all different aspects of those. And we have software here at Hangar AE, which is where I work, that processes the data that the engineers at Hangar AE would look at. There are engineers at SpaceX Hangar X who have their own software that look at all of that, and it's tailored to their needs. You're right. There is a whole lot of data. It takes a whole lot of software to process all of it. The cables that we need to receive that data are very, very large. I hope that answers your question.
If I may.
So she did further expand on that a little bit later on about, just the massive amount of data that is coming through, and, the amount of people it takes to look at that data and how AI or machine learning might play a role. But she also did mention that, and it's a very valid concern that for a lot of these larger sort of chat bots, ChatGPT, for example, Claude, for example, a lot of these things, you're not exactly sure what happens with your data after the fact. So there's definitely, I think, a hesitancy to use that part of the private sector. So she kind of insinuates that, SpaceX probably, knowing who the founder is, has access to their own machine learning, their own AI, different tools to sort through all of that massive amount of data. And NASA has their own system and their own ways of doing that too. But they're not necessarily going to tell me that they're using, I didn't know what the answer would be, but all I could think about was just the massive amount of data that they're collecting, that they have to sort through, and do they have any help to sort through it? And sometimes machine learning, sometimes algorithms and AI can help in that regard, or in certain circumstances it could be a hindrance, and you could rely on those systems a little too much. And so I think that they're trying to balance, if I'm reading between the lines of what she answered just in that clip that I just showed you, and then also later on during the press conference, they're trying to walk that fine line of really human powered intelligence that also uses AI as a sidekick, as an assistant. So that was the cool but didn't fit into a specific episode type section. I will say, so there's some more kind of behind the scenes stuff. I showed you a lot of those photos. I'm not gonna torture you and show you that again. I did talk about the launch itself and show you a few videos from that, so I'm not gonna I don't want to say I'll bore you with that, but I guess it's probably time No, wait, I did want to talk about the previous episodes. I don't know if any of y'all have, hopefully you have caught the previous 4 episodes, but I did want to mention some favorite things from each of those episodes. This won't be super long, so I won't bore you to death. But from the Noah episode, this was one of my favorite takeaways, is that the rate of launches has increased so much that it's caused a little bit of turnover. Space Force is such a cool name. I love that name. It's really grown on me through the years. But Space Force's launch weather officer said, when I got here in 2019, we only had 17 orbital launches. Last year, it was 72. This year, we're targeting about 100, give or take, depending on weather delays. So that, again, kind of goes back to how much of demand has increased for a lot of these different launches. And for folks who may have worked at NASA for a long period of time, and the rate has increased that dramatically, even in the last few years, some of these people are just saying, you know what? This is a young person's game. I'm gonna go retire and enjoy my retirement, and let the younger, hungrier people take over. So it's caused turnover at the rate of increase of the launches, but that's only specific to NASA, to that side of thing. I would like to, I would love to see some numbers in the future of maybe how many folks feel like there's too much red tape working with or relying on the government that changes every 4 years. That's very reminiscent of the Deep Space Logistics episode, where they talked about how their funding has, it went from 4% of GDP back when we first landed on the moon to now it's 0.5% of the budget. So it's a fraction of the cost, or a fraction of what they used to get. And they're still responsible for doing all of these things. And so they're almost forced to work with the private sector in that regard. So yeah, there's, I guess, the changing of the guard. There's a changing of a lot of the way this industry works. And so some of the people, I would be curious to see who is leaving, I guess, sort of the red tape around working for the government and then going to work for some of these private corporations as well, versus, just taking a retirement. I'm sure there's plenty of those folks as well. But I would love to see maybe some numbers if that is ever released. Next episode is the Deep Space Logistics episode, which I did mention about the GDP and the funding fact, and how, it's just sort of priorities change. Something that you could work on for, a decade could change as, a new administration or a new party comes into office. That's got to be incredibly frustrating to be reliant on that. But another note from the Deep Space Logistics episode is that, I showed you a bunch of those images and videos from the transporter, but there are a total of 8 drivers of the transporter. There's one woman out of all of them, so that's kind of cool. If there's only 8 drivers, I didn't expect there to be any women, quite frankly. But it was cool to hear that there is one woman who is a transporter driver. You have to have 2.5 years of training for it, but you have to work on the transporter for 5 years first. The company who built Alco, now Fairbanks, originally built the transporter. So some of the original parts, in my notes I have OG parts, they can't even get anymore because the OG company was sold so many times. John, who is, if you saw our Deep Space Logistics episode, he was featured quite frequently, but he calls the transporter the best piece of equipment in the world. And I thought that was that was really cool, because he's, all of these launches that have ever launched were carried on these 2 transporters. That's the NASA side of things. Obviously, SpaceX can kind of do their own thing, and some of these other, Rocket Lab, and if Astra can ever get a rocket working, maybe they, I doubt they would use. Don't put an Astra rocket on transporter. We don't need Astra messing up our 2 transporters that we have. Okay, so the growing food in space episode, one of the bigger takeaways for me is how growing plants in space helps from a mental health aspect, because astronauts still need those comforts of home. So happy astronauts means that you can complete your mission, that you can hopefully complete it successfully. In that episode too, they're trying to, because of microgravity that exists, it's difficult to get the flavor profile right. So things that taste a certain way on Earth might not taste the same way in space, which I thought was pretty crazy. And so a lot of the astronauts are asking for spicier food. So apparently the spicy food is not translating well from Earth to space, which is really, really interesting. So that episode, I love as a plant mom, I loved that episode because they just talk about all of the cool things that they're trying to grow. Tea was one of them with some of the photos that I have previously shared, and you can see it in that deep or the how to grow food in space episode. You can see some of the different lettuces and things like that they're growing. Potatoes, of course, shout out Matt Damon. But then also teas. So they're experimenting with growing different teas, and so astronauts can have that in space as well. And then lastly, the next frontier episode, which is why NASA needs to work with the private sector because their funding is too dependent on who's in office. That kind of circles back to the previous note. Also, the founders of Astra versus Rocket Lab in the Wild Wild Space documentary, I thought that dynamic was really interesting because you have these two rocket companies that are trying to compete with SpaceX. They're trying to build reusable rockets, but they're trying to build them smaller so they can make the thought process is that they can make more frequent missions that are more cost effective. So Rocket Lab has done an incredible job. They last I checked, this is middle of August that I'm recording this. They've had 52, I believe, successful rocket launches. Astra, not so much. They've faced a lot of challenges. Their founder is a little questionable. Watch the Wild Wild Space documentary, and you'll understand what I mean. That feeling is definitely felt among a lot of different people. But it was interesting to see, I think, the dynamic between those two founders and how they're approaching it, where one is coming at it, Astra, it's coming at it from a very capitalistic, ego-driven perspective versus the Rocket Lab founder, Peter Beck. He is coming at it from what I just my impression of watching him in the documentary, that he is coming at it from a true fan of science, a true fan of space, who was looking to have a career at NASA. But he said that when he interviewed at NASA, that he felt like everyone was talking about what they used to do and not what they were planning to do. And so he wanted a company that was going to be, forging a new path. And so that's why he started Rocket Lab. Highly recommend giving them a follow on social media because it's really cool to see. It's not just SpaceX that is doing this. Rocket Lab they were started in the southern point of New Zealand. And so they're a New Zealand space company. I believe that they have multiple launch pad locations, but I believe that their main team is headquartered in New Zealand, in the southern tip of New Zealand. One more interesting note from that Wild Wild Space documentary is that they really touched on what makes us human and what needs to be. We would talk about fuel, oxygen, food, of course. You need these things to survive, but what other parts of humans are important? And what they've discovered, especially with Antarctica, for example, there was, that's probably the closest example that we have of maybe what happens on Earth will also happen in space as well. It's a very harsh environment. You're in close quarters. You're with the same people for a very long period of time, and you're doing science-based missions. So there was in the Wild Wild Space documentary, they cited an example on why they take mental health, I guess. Or the argument was that they should take mental health much more seriously. And that's because people just, anytime if you've ever lived with someone, close quarters, especially over a long period of time, especially in an environment where you can't just pick up and leave, you can't just walk out the front door in Antarctica. You can't just walk out and take a little stroll around space, at least not yet. So you have to deal with the probable conflicts that are going to happen when you have humans in a stressful environment that aren't used to their normal routine. They got to deal with all of these additional stressors and challenges and try to just work. And you're doing that 24/7. You're living with these people, you're working with these people. So I imagine that it's only natural to get annoyed with each other. Another thing that they pointed out during the documentary is just how important faith is to humanity, faith and nature is to humanity. And if you don't have the ability to say walk on the ground, if you travel to space and it makes you question your relationship with God, or, things like that. Like, these are very real. Your mental health, your faith, and your a human's attachment to nature. These are all very real things that we need to think about as we continue to go up into space and continue to build out this infrastructure. Is how are we going to tackle those key things that really make us human? And I think that that is a fascinating part of space travel and space exploration and expansion that hasn't really been tackled. And I'm not sure that there's ever going to be a clear answer for it. So definitely highly advise. Of course, I advise go listen to the other 4 episodes that we have created if you haven't already. And if you haven't already, go to HBO, go to Max, and download or stream this Wild Wild Space documentary. It is just full of just really interesting insights and information, and just the growth of this industry and where it's going. I think that's about it. I think it's time for the goodie bag. So if you are tuning in and you don't care, I don't blame you. But I thought it might be fun to kind of, do an unboxing, but NASA style. So this bag has been sitting in the back of my camera in the background of my camera views for, I don't know, the past 2 months. And so knowing that, I can now, I know that I knew that I was going to record this episode. So I've been having it just sit there to wait. I haven't put any of this stuff up yet. So let's go through it. This would be good, reminder to myself what exactly was in this bag. Okay, so first we have Launch Services Program folder. We got a lot of documents in here. So there's a lot of different brochures. Oh, there's a lot of different photos. Here, let me show you a couple of these photos. So this is the International Space Station at a glance. Hopefully you can see that. Just a cool, some really cool photos. It was a NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It was a NOAA launch. So we also got Hurricane Michael, a Category 5 storm. So this was a photo that they shared with us. I don't know what I'm going to do with that exactly. Welcome to Kennedy Space Center. And it says launching humanity's future, which is really cool. So that's just a little postcard that they gave us. Also, they gave us this map of all of the different launch complexes. So just to, it's so big. Oh my gosh. So just look at this map. Look at all of these locations. You can't even see my face. The map is so big. It's crazy. There's a lot of stuff going on. So there's a lot of, I'm not going to bore you with this other paperwork. Some cool things that I actually forgot about was all of the stickers and the patches that they gave us. I love stickers and patches. I mean, who doesn't? So here are some cool. So we got some NASA patches, which are really cool, both iron-on and sticky. What is this one? Oh, Launch Services Program. Little patch. A NOAA patch. A Goes You patch. I will definitely do something with this. I actually have 2 of these patches, so we will do something with these. Not exactly sure yet what. Lockheed Martin sticker. International Space Station sticker. We have some more. I mean, it's just, NOAA, NASA stickers. That's cool. Maybe we'll give a friend of the show, Grace Sharkey, one of these NASA stickers as well. I did get her because she talked on a previous episode of Freight Friends. She talked about the transporter. And I didn't even, a little maybe behind the scenes cool moment from that is I had already applied to that particular, the NASA social program for the Goes You launch. I just hadn't heard anything back. And so when Grace was on the show and she was talking about, we were doing our source to port, the logistics of segment, she picked the transporter. And so she talked about it really heavily. And so, and this was before she even knew that I had this opportunity because it wasn't confirmed yet. So I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to jinx myself. But when it got confirmed, and when I was there on site, I may have borrowed a rock for Grace too. So we got some Lockheed Martin sunglasses. Sure, those kind of looks glow in the dark. Okay. Oh, see, I haven't looked at this stuff in like 2 months. Okay, so we have a launch services program notebook. There's, nothing inside. It's just, a standard notebook, but we love a good notebook. Another notebook. This one is the L3 Harris that looks like a satellite. Is very like hologrammy. But I'll be honest, like some of the stuff that they gave us, you could tell it was kind of just laying around, but I will take anything that NASA gives me. Anything. Oh, we got business cards. I forgot about these business cards. Okay. Oh, I didn't know that I left this in here. It's my badge. So I always, anytime I go, if you see me at a conference, you know that I always have this Everything is Logistics badge on my conference badge. So this is going to go with the rest of the collection, but I'm going to put it up front because, frankly, I don't know that I will ever get a cooler badge than this one. I mean, this definitely career peak for me. Making this episode, and that's probably a good place to end it because no, wait, I lied. Thought I was gonna get a little sentimental there. Pull myself together. Okay, y'all know I love pins. I just showed you the Everything is Logistics pin. So we got a few pins. Okay, so we have a Goes You pen. Can you see it? Oh, this camera. It's very nice. Oh, there it goes. Oh, well, Jesus. Let's see. Come on. Focus, right? Oh, sorry. I wish the the settings are to focus on the face. And so anytime I put other things in front of it, it's just going to mess things up. So little NASA pin, little satellite pin. What else we got? We got a NOAA pin. Another NOAA NASA pin. And then launch services program. So we have all of our pins, which is definitely the most exciting thing. I have to put that up on my pin board, but cool little NASA bag. Not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. Probably frame it. You think I'm lying? Probably not. I'm probably not lying. I probably will do this. But this has really been a pleasure to create this 5-part series. Like I said earlier, I only thought this was going to be one episode. And when I really started diving into a lot of this different content, I said, I have to share this. I will be applying to future NASA social things in the future. So hopefully, I mentioned that I do believe that this is the pinnacle of my career. I've been making content online since 2007. Started off as a sports and entertainment blogger, moved into logistics when I was an executive assistant working at a 3PL. So I always tried to balance like doing content at night and working my day job. I am very fortunate where now this podcast is my full-time income. It's not my only income, but it is my full-time income where I put a lot of this effort, and I wouldn't be able to create episodes like this without the support of my audience and without the support of my sponsors. So a big, big shout out to SPI Logistics. They're the best freight agent program in the game. Also TIE Software, the best 3PL TMS that's out on the market. Fabulous people that work over there. And then also new partner in Trimble Transportation. So very, very thankful to my sponsors for allowing me to be able to not worry about, where my next paycheck is going to come from, because, we are sponsor supported over a long period of time, which is why you hear a lot of the same ads in every episode. I will be switching those up because I could tweak those and make them better. It's all part of this whole process of, creating content since 2007. You try to figure out ways to do things a little bit better. If I go back to NASA, I will know of things that I need to do better. Number one, bring a tripod. That's lesson number one. But then outside of that, this has really been a pleasure to create. It's really been, I think, a culmination of my life's work is to create these episodes. And it's really lit a fire under me. It makes me want to make better and better and better episodes. And so I believe that this is just the start for me, and to making content like this and making more of it in the future, and being able to continuously add more people to our team. so that I don't have to worry about the video editing, so I don't have to, worry about these, these different things, and I can bring people in who are really good at those particular parts of the job, so I can focus more on the content itself. But this is a really long way of saying thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of this, and thank you for, allowing me to be able to share and tell stories like this. I means the world to me. So hope you enjoyed. We will have more NASA/space episodes on in the future. We're looking at a cadence of probably once a month. Made a lot of really great contacts. And so with all that said, thank you again. Hopefully you'll go back and listen to the other episodes, share it with your friends, because that also really helps, get this show and grow this show to new people. And I just think that everybody should know about all of the cool things and the logistics of space and all of the things that are going on to make those operations happen. So thank you again.